So Arsenal are linked with another defender. Now, a lot of people may be complaining, why are Arsenal linked with so many defenders and midfielders and left backs when clearly we need attackers and strikers. However, I'm just here to say who Arsenal are linked to, and I'll give my opinions afterwards. And the player that we are linked to today is Cristhian Mosquera, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about him, just giving him a little bit of a breakdown and just really going through his profile. Now, he plays for Valencia currently. He's a centre back, but he could also play as a right back. He is around 20 years old. He's 6'2", so to add to the list of the other 6-foot players that Arsenal currently have in the squad, I know there's the running joke of Arsenal being a basketball team, but for me that's probably a good thing to have height in the team. It creates intimidation, but that's besides the point. So a little bit more about him. He joined Valencia in 2016, where he played a little bit of futsal, and he was also part of Hercules. And he made his debut when he was 17 years old, and last season he was able to play 37 games. So from that point of view, you can argue that he's a reliable defender. Even at 20 years old, he can play a lot of games and he can start a lot of games, and because of that, that will be very good for Arsenal, especially as someone who you could rely on to come into the side. Now, in terms of some of his style of play and some of the stats, defensively, he has good winning recoveries, he's good at anticipating the ball, and he's good on the right side on the centre-back position. Now, for Saliba, we have to ask ourselves, who is the player that can essentially be a backup to him? And a lot of people are arguing that could be Ben White or that could be Timber. Now, here's the thing, it's like, I know these players could play that position, but maybe for a few games, but they're not really natural centre backs. Maybe you could argue with Ben White, but because we played Ben White so much in the right back position, at this stage he is more of a right back than he is a centre back. So with Mosquera, he is a centre back, but he could also play full back, and that can add to the versatility in his game, and we all know how much Mikel Arteta loves versatility. Now, one of the weaknesses this guy has is that his aerial duels. He is only able to win 44% of his duels in the air. Now, when it comes to corners and free kicks, and especially just crosses coming in, that needs to be a lot better. And well, I would say that maybe he's young, maybe that he can improve. And I think that with a young defender that he is of 20 years old, he can gain a lot of experience and learn a lot from Gabriel and Saliba, who in my opinion are both elite defenders. He's not played in the British game before, he's not played in the Premier League, so there's going to be a lot of physicality in the Premier League. There's going to be a lot of fast-paced action going on. Even a player like Koulibaly found it difficult to play in the Premier League. So for him being young, for him having the willingness to learn and improve, I think he has time on his side, but it's just something that we're going to have to be a bit patient with him on. Now, he has Colombian roots, but he's represented Spain through under 15 to under 21, and he's won the Olympic gold in 2024, so he went to France. And I think another thing with him is that he was captain of some of those sides, so he has some sort of leadership experience that he could bring into Arsenal. Similar to Norgard, him being the captain of Brentford, he was also captain of Spain in the between the under 15 to under 21 level. Now, in terms of the value that he has, now some people say he's valued at around 30 million pounds or 30 million euros. I know with Arsenal they made an initial bid of around 10 to 15 million, but Valencia won around 15 to 20 million. Now, for a young defender, he's probably seen as a cheapish option, and if we're looking at mainly on money, and especially someone who's young, has a decent potential, who can be a backup, I think that is a good bit of business because Arsenal need depth. In terms of the contract, it runs until 2026, so he's only got a 1 year left around his contract, and Valencia are probably looking to cash in, so it's quite clear we could probably get him on the cheap. And he can play in the back four, he can play in the back three, so we can clearly say he's very versatile. One thing that I really noticed when I saw him play in his highlights is that he's able to ping the ball left and right. He doesn't mind doing a bit of the long ball, if that makes sense, and going route one. So, and that's very similar to Ben White as well. So I think with some of the players that we buy, especially in defense, you have to have that ability to ping the ball long, and that's similar with Ben White. And I think with Mosquera, that's something he could provide. He's physical, he has versatility, he can represent a long-term investment, especially with Arsenal. he has good people that he can look at. For example, he has Timber, he has Saliba, he has Gabriel, so he can learn a lot. And I think that for somebody who is seen as a high potential defender, I think he can be pretty good. In terms of ball progression, he's pretty good. He's got 5.8 progressive passes per 90, which is really good for a defender, especially in La Liga. In terms of composure, he was able to play out the back, which is something that Arsenal do quite a lot of. He's good at one-touch passes and triangles, which is very similar to Arteta's formation and his system. One of the defensive tendencies is that he's not really as aggressive as Gabriel. He's more of a guy that waits for the ball, he anticipates it. But I would argue that Saliba is like that and Gabriel is more on the aggressive side. So you need to have the good balance of the two. So I think as a backup to Saliba and someone who's more molded in the anticipation style like Saliba, he will probably be pretty good in that way. And in terms of recovery runs, when you're trying to play a high line, just like Tottenham or Big Ange, for example, he's good at making those recovery runs. And if they come back on the counter attack on the break, he can get back quite quickly. And he's fast, agile, he's got long legs, and he's a mobile defender. So that's really good. He's praised by coaches for having a high IQ. And in terms of his personality, he's humble, hardworking, and highly coachable. That's not something that I've said. Those are some of the things that other coaches that he's played around have said. And we all know with Arteta, he wants players that are going to listen, do as they're told, follow the formation to the T. And I think that is what's going to happen. Now, other clubs has been linked, such as Juventus, Dortmund, and Napoli. His release clause is at 80 million euros, but because he's only got about 1 year left on his deal, Valencia are willing to accept a cheaper price. They want between 20 to 25 million, but Arsenal are trying to get it under the 20 million mark. So yeah, I think that's just some of the things to look forward to. It's quite clear his aerial game needs a lot of work, which is subpar in the Premier League of only 44%, but with good coaching and with our guy that's there, Nicolas Jovas, he will hopefully get that improved in his game. And in terms of his youth, it's quite clear he's quite raw, but over time he'll be pretty good. Overall, I think that he will be good as a backup. He won't be a Gabriel backup, but I think he'll be more on the right side of a Saliba type of mold. Will he be as good as Saliba? God knows. I think Saliba is in a league of his own as a defender, but I think this guy's he can really improve and he has good potential. And in all the defenders that Arsenal have in terms of players that can play centre back, which is Saliba, Gabriel, Ben White, arguably Kiwior, and maybe Mosquera, I think we have 4 to 5 players that can play centre back, which is in itself good depth. Now, in terms of what else that he can do, in terms of pass completion, he's better than Ben White. He's a bit lower than Saliba, but that's not bad. He does more interceptions compared to Saliba and White, but in terms of where he's played in Valencia, in the league and the team he's in, will he be making as many interceptions as in Arsenal in the top team? We'll have to wait and see. He wins more tackles. So just to give a bit of context, so Saliba's aerial duels won is 62% and Mosquera's 44%. So clearly he really needs to improve on that. Mosquera really does a lot more clearances than Saliba and White, but I think something that's very common in this Arsenal team is that instead of clearances, they want to find ways where if you're under pressure on the ball, how do you still get it out and pass it to the next man rather than just booting it out? And I think that's something that's very common, especially in Premier League teams or in top teams across the world. Instead of booting it out, find a way to pass it, especially under pressure. So I think that's something that he's just going to have to learn and improve on, but I think over time, I think he will be able to develop that. And yeah, I think that is that. I think tactically, he's a good tactical fit in that sense. The value, he's a cheap defender, especially in this day and age, and with players going for so much amount of money, he will be a good fit for Arsenal in my opinion. And overall, just to give my little verdict, look, I get it. We need strikers, we need left wingers, we need attackers, full stop. But Arsenal also need to improve their depth. And if we're really being honest, let's count the amount of defenders that Arsenal have. In the front four, it's Skelly, Gabriel, Saliba, Timber. Then the backups are Calafiori, Kiwior, Ben White. And then there's no certainty on what we can say about Zinchenko and Tomiyasu. And we all know Tierney just went out the door as well. So overall there is a lot of faces in Arsenal where we can improve on. Defensively, we don't have to improve on as much, but I think if we were to give a definitive answer, who's the backup to Saliba, we can't really give that answer. I mean, yeah, we can say, yeah, players can move in positions and this and that, but personally, I'm not comfortable with that. I know players are good, versatile players, like for example, we've got some good versatile players like Ben White and Timber and that, but we need players that can just stick to certain positions. And I think with Mosquera, he needs to play that centre-back role. We need a backup centre-back, especially on the right side. And I think with Mosquera, he'll be able to do that. And then when we do have our defenders for next season, we'll have 8 defenders, so 2 for every position, and maybe you can add the extra one in case if something happens to one defender. So you'll have 8 to 9 defenders who can come in and do a job. Oh, like I said, we don't know what the hell is going to happen with Tomiyasu, whether he's even going to play next season, or what's going to happen with Zinchenko, or whether he's going to go to midfield or whatever, or hell, even with Skelly, what's going to happen with him? Will he go to midfield or stay in left back? God knows what's going to happen with Arsenal. But overall, in terms of the money, in terms of the price, in terms of what we're bringing in as a defender, I think it's a good deal between, I'd say 15 to 20 million. It's a cheap deal. He's a young player with good potential. Yes, he's not the finished article, but though sometimes there are a lot of players that aren't like that, and over time with the development under these defenders and in the system, I think he'll improve, and I think he'll be pretty good for Arsenal. And let's just say things don't work out with the age that he's at, and hopefully with the contract we'll be able to give him, he'll have good resale value in the future. So overall, I think this will be a good deal to make in terms of having good depth options. Now, like I said, we want the striker and left winger. I'm not going to judge this window yet because we need to see the big money moves, and if we're able to cut corners and cut costs on certain players, like getting a Mosquera in, who's a cheaper option, I think it's worthwhile doing, especially because he's a depth option, because we really need to spend the cash and blow the cash on that striker and on those attacking positions, especially when we're linked to the likes of Sesko, Gyökeres and Rodrigo. But yeah, that is the end of this video. That's my thoughts on Cristhian Mosquera. I think that he'll be a decent addition if Arsenal decide to get him. But those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Please let me know in the comments, and hopefully like and subscribe in this video. Hopefully we'll be linked to more players and I'll discuss more on them, and I hope to see you all soon in the next video. Bye bye.